Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be reacting to a video called Why Dutch Parents Raise the Happiest Kids in the World. Well, I wasn't aware that apparently the happiest kids are in the Netherlands, but I guess we're going to find out why. So let's check it out and comment, like, and subscribe.
Hey! Luna and Flynn are among the happiest children in the world. That's right, kids in the Netherlands rank first in happiness, according to a UNICEF study from 2025. So what are parents here doing right?
We really try to let them be kids first, and then along the way try to see where they end up.
That's how it should be.
This is a lot different than the US where I grew up. American kids tend to have a lot more structured learning, even in their earlier years of preschool.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at why kids in the Netherlands are happier than kids in the US, and why, according to that UNICEF study, they are healthier and seem to have more practical life skills than American kids.
They have less responsibilities.
It's 7:30 Friday morning just outside Amsterdam. 3-year-old Luna, mother Marlotte, 1-year-old Flynn, and father Felix start their day with breakfast together. For Marlotte and Felix, like many Dutch parents, sharing the morning is a crucial daily ritual.
Oh, that's nice.
Ben je vis?
Are those pancakes?
For us, it's important that we spend enough time together. We have breakfast, we bring them to daycare. I go to work, and then maybe sometimes I have plans in the evening as well. And I only see them in the morning, that 1 hour, 1.5. For me, it's important that we spend it together.
Sure.
Time now to get ready for daycare.
Even in the small things, putting your coat on or putting your clothes on, eating, we always try to promote that children are doing it themselves.
Yes,
in the Netherlands, even children under the age of 3 typically attend daycare. In fact,
I think it just depends on the parents' life. Sometimes you take them to daycare, sometimes you don't. But I like the idea of them being independent.
nearly 80% of them do. That's double the EU average.
Yeah.
But still, daycare is expensive to say the least.
Oh, really? Even in the Netherlands? Or you're talking about the USA? Because it is expensive.
Families
in the
do
USA.
receive support from the state, but costs are a burden nonetheless. Luna and Flynn attend daycare 3 days a week.
What happens the other 2 days?
It's all privately owned, so none of the daycares that I know of are public. These are often increasingly owned by private equity firms, so they're in it for a profit, which is okay, but it does jack up the price a little bit compared to maybe public versions in other countries. So many people are not too happy with this model.
Oh, really?
Even so, receiving any state support at all for childcare costs would be a dream for many American families.
Yeah.
In the US, childcare can cost as much or more than college tuition, and funding isn't always accessible.
I didn't know the statistics. More than college tuition is crazy, but I know it is really expensive.
In fact, on average, an American family has to spend almost a quarter of their income on childcare.
Wow, that's so expensive.
In the Netherlands, parents are entitled to maternity and paternity leave.
That's incredible.
And they can take that parental leave until the child turns 8.
8?
Like many Dutch fathers, Felix doesn't take his leave all at once.
Oh, you can do
Instead,
that.
he takes a weekly Papa Day to focus on the kids and himself too.
Oh, that's nice. Oh my god, that sounds like a dream.
If I feel well, if I feel fit, then it should reflect on my children as well, at least indirectly. So when you're inside all day and feeling grumpy, then it
A happy parent creates a happy kid.
doesn't help the mood of my kids, of course. So I try to be out and have a good mood.
I was personally much happier inside with a book as a kid, but for Dutch parents, being outdoors in nature is simply part of raising children.
Depends on your personality.
And Marlotte and Felix are no exception. They take their children outside as often as possible, no matter the weather.
Oh, even if it's raining?
If you go to a Dutch playground, quite often you'll see parents letting their children play independently.
I like that. That's really how it should be, I
Normally,
think.
we also motivate, especially Luna, of course, because she's a bit older, to play for herself today. Today, it's a bit unfortunate that there are not too many other kids. But normally we yeah, we encounter so many other kids here.
Yeah,
all from
with the
daycare.
kids.
They all know each other. We can sit at the terrace, have a drink, and Luna can entertain herself. Yeah.
Yeah, but you have
I'm
to
from
check on
suburban
them.
Ohio, where you absolutely need a car to get around. And it's like that in most of the US. That's why many
Everything.
Americans get their driver's license as soon as they can.
Yes.
But things are different in the Netherlands. Here, even the youngest kids are totally comfortable with a different mode of transportation, the bicycle.
That's crazy to me.
For 36% of the Dutch population, the bicycle is king, and the primary mode of transport.
The thing about using a bike as a means of transport, I think is just crazy because to me a bike is just something that you do as a kid and then you kind of take laps around the neighborhood, but you're not actually going places.
And because parents want their children to be independent early on, the kids learn to ride from a very young age.
I think apart from the logistical reasons, it's also I think a sign of independence and also trust that we're giving her, that she
It's
can
true.
do it herself. Obviously, she still
a cute
uses
bike.
the exercise wheels, but I'm guessing with her speed we can quickly take them off. It's a no-brainer that you get a bike.
She's
on your
3,
fifth
of course.
birthday. Yeah, so
You use
very
the training
typical
wheels.
Dutch.
For many Dutch parents, family ties are indispensable. Luna and Flynn's grandparents come by regularly to babysit. But it's
Do they
more
have
than
to pay
just
them?
support with childcare.
It's very important for us to have our parents close to us raising our children. I think it's so much fun for them. It's so nice for us to see them more often, see them weekly,
Oh, true.
spend time with them.
Sure, the Netherlands is small, so it's more likely that grandparents live nearby. But
True,
a lot of my
that's
friends
well.
with kids in the US live in totally different states from their parents.
Yeah.
So they can't just drop off their kids
It's
with
not
grandma
feasible.
and grandpa. So it's independence, social interaction, and being outdoors with plenty of playtime that are cornerstones of parenting in the Netherlands.
Yeah. See the difference though.
In many, many other places, children are raised much more strict and with a very clear, well, career path almost.
It's
We
true,
are
yes.
active, like we like to go outside and show them the world, also traveling. But it's not because they need to be the best, especially when they're young, they need to be kids.
Kids, yeah.
The Netherlands is not necessarily paradise on earth. Like any other country, it has its problems. But having happy kids is a good start to a happy society. What do you think about
True.
the Dutch way of raising children? How does it compare to parenting styles where you live? Let us know in the comments.
Yeah, how interesting. I think it is, it always is going to depend as well, because obviously you can't just say, oh, Dutch kids are all like this, or, in the USA, American kids are all like that. Because it's just going to depend on the type of parents that people have. And I do believe that, I get that this is a generalization because it's most of the people do this. But I think ultimately it's just going to depend on how you were raised or how you raise your kids. And it's all about, again, there's a little part, I think, that comes, maybe it's not the norm, but, you maybe go around a different path. Or, I don't know, it's just, again, it's just going to depend. But I do think there's several things that I am shocked, besides the bicycle thing. I think they're ultimately, they're a little bit more, well, to begin with the whole parental leave, I think that's really practically, I would say, unheard of in the American system. You're lucky if you get a few weeks. It's not something that, and up until you're 8, by the time the kid's 8, no, come on, you have to have used your parental leave. And that's even if you're lucky to get a few days or a few weeks, because I know that a lot of people do not have, they're not that lucky. So to be able to, I don't think they actually mentioned for how long the parental leave is for. But the idea that you can just sort of, you don't have to use it all at once, as in, you don't necessarily have to stay at home and just, for 6 months and just be with your child, which, well, again, because it just depends. I think when it comes, actually, I have to say this, when it comes to families raising kids, and again, families and people in general, it's just very much what it works for you. I think it's a case by case thing. It's not maybe what works for one family or for one person. It's not going to work for the other. I think it's just a very individual thing, how you go along things, and how, again, how you kind of you raise your family, or how you decide to raise someone, or how you decide to, again, to have a family. I think it's just a very different, again, it just varies by case. But ultimately, I do understand that, again, maybe if you have, someone's going to look after you, again, for the baby, as in a baby. I don't think, actually, maybe this is wild for me to say, but I think babies, they're not, obviously you're going to be overwhelmed. It's a baby, right? You don't know what to do with this thing. But assuming this is your first baby, I think maybe once you go in the second or the third one, maybe you have a little bit more of an idea of what to do. But I think, again, when it comes to first-time parents, you have a baby, and it's, you're really overwhelmed by the whole thing, of course. But I think babies do not really, again, maybe crazy for me to say, but I think they're not really, you have to be there, obviously, 24/7. But, they sleep a lot, so it's just, they're constantly sleeping, and you have to, obviously, you have to feed them, but it's just more about they're sleeping, they're eating, sometimes they're crying, but if they're crying, it's probably because they're sleepy, or they want a change of diaper, or they're hungry. So it's kind of easy, I think, to manage a baby. I think when it comes to, by the time they're, like we saw, there's a toddler and a 3-year-old, I think that's where you really have to be there. You have to, oh my God, because it's not about supervision, because again, a baby, I think it just takes up less of, maybe it's not about taking care of them, because even though probably toddlers and, this 3-year-old, it's a little bit more independent in the sense of, they're not going to feed themselves. So you're not going to be, hey, grab your own, maybe, yes, grab your lunch, maybe, I don't know, if does a 3-year-old, I don't know if you're going to 3-year-old do that, but you're not going to tell them, hey, make yourself a sandwich. No, that's not really, again, it's a 3-year-old. But it's probably more important, and they're a little bit more independent in that sense of taking care of their actual needs, obviously, compared to a baby. But you need to be more on top of things, because again, they know how to talk. They'll talk to you. Their thinking is being developed. So you're gonna have to be a little bit more sort of on top of things. Ask questions. They're going to ask questions. You have to answer to them, and they're probably gonna get bored because they're a tiny person. So they're gonna be bored. They're gonna be, again, they need more attention. And again, maybe that's just a wild thing for me to say. Maybe babies do take more of your attention and take up more of your time. But from the outside, I see it as, I think a toddler, actually, you have to be more attentive to toddlers than babies, because babies usually are just either sleeping or they're eating, but it's more manageable. And a kid is already, again, it walks already, so you have to chase them, and again, it's more about, you have to be on top of things. So I think I like the idea of them being, you can choose your parental leave. And again, when it's a baby, maybe you have a family member, someone that's really going to help you through that time. But then afterwards I think you actually need the time. No, I actually need some time off, because again, it's really unmanageable to have a toddler or a kid. And again, I'm going to be stressed. I'm going to, like he said, if I'm not really taking time for myself, if I am unhappy, I'm going to be grumpy. And that reflects on my kids, right? You're not going to be, the kids maybe going to start thinking, maybe not, they don't really have the ability probably to process this, but you're creating trauma probably when they become an adult that said, oh, I asked my dad to do whatever, and he talked badly to me, I don't know. And then, that starts a whole thing, and maybe it wasn't really about you, and I think maybe creates some problems for the kids. I believe, as in, my dad hated me, and it's not, your dad has other issues, but obviously, again, when people are kids, they're not really thinking about this, and maybe when they become adults, that creates some trauma or some unresolved issues. So I like the idea of them, no, you can take this as long as you want, by the time they're 8, you probably, you're used up all your parental leave, because you don't have to do it all at once. It's more like, I need a few days because I'm exhausted, or I'm very overwhelmed by things at work and at home, because again, you have 2 small kids, and of course your own issues. So it's more like, I need to take a couple of days off, and I'm gonna wake up feeling refreshed after the 2 days, and then I'm going to have, and your work is going to improve, and your home life is going to improve. So you're gonna be a happier and a better parent, and also you're going to be better at work. So I love that idea of them. No, you can take your parental leave anytime you want to. It's not necessarily a baby, or in the first year, or in the first 2 years, because maybe you have other family members that are going to step in, or maybe your partner is staying at home. I don't know what sort of how family looks like for you and how child rearing looks like. But I think that's a great idea. I think I was surprised as well by the fact that he was saying, oh, daycare is quite expensive and people are not super happy about this. Because I think, the fact that apparently there's also public daycares in the Netherlands, apparently they're subsidized by the state. He did mention I think there's a really big difference. But still, even if you don't have the money, I like the idea of, the state is going to help you along with this, maybe with, subsidize as one part. I don't know how it works. But in the US, that's unheard of completely. No, you have to do, daycare is not really something that the state or the government is going to solve for you. It's more as you have to figure things out, but you either find a very expensive daycare. I knew they were expensive. I didn't know they were that expensive, especially compared to college tuition. That's wild to me, but I get it, right? It's a lot of responsibility. Again, there's kids, there's babies. That sometimes, and again, it's more responsibility because it's a baby, but it's not about the cost, the actual cost itself. It's more about, again, the idea of them, of you having someone to help you along with this. And I know that when it comes to family planning in the US, that's a really big sort of hurdle because it's just really expensive. I didn't really know how expensive it was, but I know that it is very expensive. And that's why a lot of people either choose because it's cheaper. Sometimes it's crazy, but sometimes it's even cheaper for a parent to stop working and, maybe the parent that earns more is going to continue to support the household and the parent that earns less is going to stay at home because if you look at the numbers, it was going to be more expensive to pay for daycare than what your actual salary costs. So it's more about, what your salary is. So it's more about, if we're going to save that money on daycare, you should quit your job and that's it, and you're going to stay at home and deal with the baby, which I think it's what a lot of families do in the US because again, it's a crazy thing to think of, but that's really the case. It's just cheaper for one parent to stop working instead of just paying for daycare, or they either, of course, sometimes they have grandparents stepping in, which apparently the Dutch also have, and I guess it just depends. It's good that they're helping you along. You see them a few times a week. If they're lucky enough to live nearby or they're still alive. Sometimes people's parents just die by the time they're kids. By the time you have kids, the parents are already they already passed away. But again, it's just, and again, this is what I mean. Everything's really just dependent on so many factors. That assuming that you have the grandparents and they live nearby and they can step in. I don't think it should be as a whole, but a lot of people do this. And again, it's just going to depend. Some people's grandparents are probably going to be, I don't really mind doing this. But you can babysit for a little while. Maybe, again, it's not as if babysitting as if it's 2 hours. No, they just come around and they're with the babies or with the kids. And again, they're playing along. And it's just a fun sort of experience and a fun time. As in you're visiting your grandkids, which great. But when it comes to, I think that the idea of them being responsible for the child, for raising a kid, I don't really know how I feel about this because sometimes people even pay their grandparents, as in, they pay their parents for them to babysit their kids. And maybe it may seem as something crazy because why are you paying your parents for your in-laws for them to babysit your kids? They're their grandkids. But I understand because sometimes they have lives as well, right? I think a lot of people feel, by the time people are retired or the grandparents, they don't have lives, and it's sort of, hey, what are you gonna do? Please, come along, babysit my kid, or maybe I'll it's free daycare basically, and it shouldn't be like that, right? I think, even older people, even they're retired, they have their own lives. They probably want to do, and they want to enjoy what time they have now that they're retired. So it's more about, no, I'm not going to compromise your time because I know you have your own life, and I'm not going to be, hey, I'm bringing the kid over, from the hours of 9 to 3, I don't know, whatever it is. So I think a lot of people fall into that free daycare thing. And I understand on the upside, on the side of the grandparents, why they're probably, I said, I'm not gonna, again, I can go a few times a week and just play with my grandkids because it's nice. But I'm not gonna be there, 5 days a week as a responsible thing because this isn't a job. This isn't my job, right? You should figure things out. So it's more about finding a balance probably. And again, I'm not saying that in the Netherlands that's the case because it seems to be as a very, I know, it's not a strict thing, as in, yes, you have to go on Wednesdays at, from the hours of 9 to whatever. No, it's just about they're visiting a few times a week, and it's just a very natural process, which is obviously, I love that. It's very, I think, a very familiar and a very, I think, the nuclear family, I think it's bigger. I think I think in the US, I think that's really been something that's on the decline, but it's just a lot of factors, right? A lot of people maybe, they live in opposite states, they live somewhere else. So it's sort of parents and siblings, and that's it, but you don't usually, or sometimes you don't really live close to your family a lot of the time. So it's really, they're lucky in that sense. But ultimately, I like that the whole of the different factors that really do take care, in order to make for a happy kid. It was really funny what she was mentioning, and the presenter was talking about. Though I would have been happy, inside with a book. And apparently, Dutch kids are not nerds. They really like their outdoor culture, but I think you have to take into account, again, maybe some kids are they're not outdoorsy. They, again, like she mentioned, I'd like to be outside with a book, please. So it's really funny to think, oh my God, our Dutch people and Dutch kids, what happens if they don't really enjoy that outdoorsy culture? You can obviously go in a playground. I think all kids by nature probably enjoy playgrounds. But, when it comes to, again, them being a little bit older, or again, developing their own personalities, it's like, I don't want to go to the park. I want to sit in the couch and have my book. So, it's really, I would love to see how those Dutch kids fare. Because not everyone can be outdoorsy, right? You have to have some sort of balance. I think, again, nature and nurture. Well, sometimes again, kids have their own personalities, and they just do not care about being outside and playing on the dirt and, I don't know, getting wet in the rain. Some people are like that, so it's really funny of me to think what happens with the other kids. But yeah, I think maybe there are some things that we definitely we can actually adapt as usual. There's some things that maybe you have to, this wouldn't work for me, so you wouldn't do it. But a lot of these things, I think, they're really good tips that you have to, again, I think probably the biggest one would be the daycare thing, because again, if you have either a cheaper daycare option, and again, I think a daycare is great. I think some people are not really into why should daycare is bad. I don't think it's bad. It's just more because, again, they're being independent. You're teaching them independence. They're not with you 24/7. And also, I think it's more about socializing with other kids as well. That's a really important thing. If people are, they're constantly at home, I think they're really unsocialized. So it's really good. And besides, kids in general, they want to play along with other kids. You do your best to sort of keep up with them. But at this, you don't have the brain of a 3-year-old. So of course, between them, they're going to be much, much happier if they're just playing among themselves. And if you're not trying to, because again, you're thinking as an adult, it's not really the same. So I like the idea, and I think it's just better in general for people to be in daycare. That's not really a bad thing or a judgmental thing. I said, kids shouldn't be on daycare. You have to be with them all the time. It's no. That really also, I think, you can develop they can develop a codependency and stuff. No, so it's really good. They're actually being independent. They're being outside. It's good, the separation. It doesn't mean you love them less. It's actually trying to, you're trying to grow them into actual competent adults, which I think is really, really good. But again, a really good tips. Take some of these. Probably, if they work for you. If they don't work for you, do not. But I really do think there are some tips that certain elements that I think all countries, or in a lot of countries, can definitely take from this. But that was it for today, and I'll see you next time. Bye.